Welcome to Foolproof Theology. My name is Chase Davis, and it's great to be with you here again today. Hey, today on the show, we've got a guest that I'm super pumped about. George Gilder, he is a legend, and to my own shame, I did not know who George Gilder was before Canon Press re-released his book, Men and Marriage, and since then, I've been doing a deep dive on the legend that is George Gilder, getting canceled before it was cool, and so I'm glad to have George on the show. George, thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Well, it's great to be here. It's exciting to be promoting Men and Marriage again after 50 years. This book's been out for 50 years, and it's been suppressed. It had to change its name in order to enter the publishing arena in disguise. It was originally Sexual Suicide. And that title was considered too provocative for some people. And I was scandalized under that title. So in order to get it out, I changed it to Men and Marriage, and an obscure publishing house named Pelican in Gretna, Louisiana was the only place that would print it. And so it's been under Pelican for these 50 years, and they've sold it steadily for all this time. And then Canon Press cruised in and have just done a brilliant job in launching the book again with a movie. They got a movie of my life, which surprised me. It found out all kinds of things that I hadn't fully remembered, and also rendered my works more coherent than I'd even imagined. I mean, this is a film called The Sage Against the Machine that is really an amazing job they did. They spent about 2 weeks at my house doing it, and I had no idea what was going to come out, and it's just great. So it's exciting. Getting Sexual Suicide and its new name and new cover, but very old picture of me on the cover. But there's a new picture inside. Anyway, it's Men and Marriage comes back, and it's more relevant than ever. You know, when I wrote it, it lamented the breakdown of the family in the inner city and across the country. And at that point, inner city illegitimacy was 25%. And the rest of the country's illegitimacy rate was, with kids born out of wedlock, was 10% or something. And today, the inner city illegitimacy rate is approaching 80%, 75 to 80%. And the white illegitimacy rate is 25%, what the black rate was back in the 1970s when I published the book. And it represents what I describe as a kind of great forgetting. We're forgetting the principles that enable human civilization to thrive, the crucial spiritual beliefs in a hierarchical universe that renders science possible and productive, and economies prosperous, and families connecting men through the wombs of women to the future of our society. And
absolutely. Yeah,
so
it's super important.
Yeah.
It's one thing I wanted to highlight up front is when you wrote this book back 50 years ago, were you writing from a Christian perspective? Have you been a Christian your whole life, or when did that come about?
I've been a Christian pretty much my whole life. My mother was a devout Christian. My father was killed in the Second World War. so I scarcely knew him. But he wrote me a letter before he left in his B-17 to go to fight the Nazis, and he told me to listen to my mother. She knew more about God than he did, and so I've always been a Christian, but Christianity has a lot of forms. It comes to you in chameleon forms. I was kind of a secular Christian when I wrote this book, and I was chiefly concerned to persuade secular society that it was committing suicide, and so that was the purpose of the book. And so I wrote it in largely secular terms with sociological and anthropological and psychological arguments, together with stories and anecdotes that explain my ideas. But it all assumes a scriptural foundation for marriage and family and fatherhood. And it ended with the faith of fathers. It's ultimately founded on faith, which all human intellect and accomplishment has to be, because the future isn't guaranteed to us. We never know until we commit. And this means that our lives are, to a great extent, a matter of defying the risks and committing ourselves to our cross before we know the outcome. And that's the essential origin of the book.
That's great. And then since that time, you've gone on to help found the Discovery Institute and other Christian institutions. I was curious, because you say you're writing to a secular audience, or you were back then. Are there things in the book that, I'm assuming with the rewrite, with the republication, you had the opportunity to maybe revisit some ideas, but over that time, since that time, have there been changes in your approach to maybe how you use secularism, or how durable you think it is and useful it is as kind of an apologetic to the world to try to capture and speak to a secular audience that is committing sexual suicide?
Well, my belief is that all science and rationality depends on a hierarchical universe, depends on the coherence lended to our world by regnant divinity, by God. And we're learning the futility of science without God. I mean, the assumption that everything that happens is merely a reflection of the random fluctuations of atoms and molecules across multiple parallel universes, or whatever the latest theory is, entertained by the delusional scientists who provide their increasingly futilitarian vision of our predicament. And the result of secular assumptions, of really what I call the materialist superstition. It's kind of a flat universe theory that secular world upholds. There's nothing there but physics and chemistry. And that materialist superstition cripples families. If you really believe there's no meaning, that it's all just arbitrary and random, the commitments to family life and moral behavior and a responsibility for children and faith in the future and is all collapses, and you see the kind of chaos that erupts in these transgender surgeries imposed on 12-year-olds and all these other debauches that are increasingly evident in our culture.
With your work, you intro the book. You start the book with an analogy of a barbarian and a princess, and I was tracking with the analogy, but I think one thing that kind of I want to understand more is to a guy. I'm only 36. I don't know if I was even born when you wrote this book, but like
You weren't.
I've seen.
You weren't. It's 60 years ago that I started working on this subject.
It's amazing. I see feminism and I see transgenderism. I see transgenderism as the kind of end of feminism. It's the byproduct. You'll get these people that want to separate themselves from transgenderism that are feminist, whether it's certain authors or whatever. But to me, transgenderism is just the byproduct, the fruit downstream of feminism. When I hear the analogy of kind of men are barbarians, women are sexually superior, I might be misreading it, but it sounds like a feminist argument, and it sounds like that mainly because the feminist argument has been men are lesser beings, men are kind of oppressive, they need to be subjugated. And so help me understand how that analogy works. Was this an analogy that you think is still pretty durable today, or do you think there might be a better one?
Well, it's. I mean, my description of the sexual superiority of women is, I don't change. I mean, maternity, motherhood, all the nurturing responsibilities, the physical bearing of children, and there is a central fact of life, and it's a central fact of sexuality. Sexuality is meaningless without motherhood and procreation. So there are trillions of sperm in every man, and only a few eggs. The crucial role is nurturing those eggs and bringing new life to the earth, and nurturing it at the breast and into the world, and and this is a process that men don't naturally necessarily have to engage. And so, I mean, they don't have to be anywhere anywhere around when the children are born. And so the key process of civilization is to link the men to this enduring futurity of implicit in motherhood and the nurture and of children. And so that's so if you're really focusing just on sex itself, motherhood is where it's at. And if you try to cut off motherhood, eclipse motherhood from this process, the men are left in a kind of wilderness. And so that argument is still true. But of course, this doesn't take away the crucial man's role as provider and protector, and as the forger of the world economy, the spearhead of economic creativity and growth, and all these roles. Women can play key roles. I don't deny it at all. But men are paramount in these areas, just as women are paramount in the procreative domain, and both are indispensable to civilized life, and both are ultimately founded on faith. if the world is really meaningless and random, there's no real reason to commit to raising a family, and you can end up in a sexual suicide society, as I describe it, when women forego their roles and men become predators. And we see in the Middle East the fruits of all this kind of collapse, and it's the key insight of this book and of my whole career, actually.
Yeah, and I think one thing as you're talking about it, one analogy I had come to mind is kind of like, because the eggs, the woman is so scarce compared to the abundance of sperm in the man, it's almost like it's more precious and it's a scarce resource. So it needs to be protected. It needs to be nurtured. We need to value motherhood.
Yeah.
And rather than looking at it as like because what I originally thought was like, well, you know, it feels like a reverse hierarchy. The woman is superior because she tames the man who is less than. But I think you're thinking it more economically and what drives civilization forward. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, but the whole it's a large hierarchical scheme with God at the pinnacle, and different roles and aptitudes of human beings in his thrall. And what this book is about is the results of burning the scriptural revelation of family roles and uh, and and really spurning the meaning of life and this is which really results in I think most of my books are about economics and technology. After this, I wrote Wealth and Poverty, which was the kind of called the Bible of supply side economics, which was a kind of derivative Bible, but it was Ronald Reagan's most quoted book by a living author, and so
That's a pretty amazing feat, George.
it was a worldwide bestseller and influenced economics everywhere, and then I started writing about technology and the discovery of the microchip, which was an immense breakthrough into what I call the microcosm, and now we've discovered a new element called graphene, which is just as important, more important actually, ultimately, than the silicon and microchips. It's just as transformative. I mean, all the wealth in the world is heavily derived from this miracle of the microchip, breaking away from the macro world into the microcosm of quantum physics and manipulating matter from the inside. It's a revelation. Carl Sagan, the physicist, popularist, writer about science, Carl Sagan used to say that, try to diminish human beings by saying there are more stars in our universe than there are grains of sand on all the beaches of the world. And it now turns out that a single grain of sand has more electrons than all the stars in the universe. And what our current science and technology is discovering, much of it in Israel, incidentally, is that graphene, a two-dimensional carbon element, 200 times stronger than steel and 1,000 times more conductive than copper, that can is the thinnest substance ever identified, but can stop bullets in flight. It's just a miracle material that
Yeah.
it will change all of electronics and communications and clothing and air transport, and you can make this substance, as Jim Tor, the great Christian voice from Rice University, who discovered much of this technology and is the world leader in it. Jim Tor, you can see him on hundreds of YouTube channels expounding his beliefs, but he shows that this is a complete transformation of technology, and he shows how you can manufacture it from garbage or from plastic waste or just any carbon refuse can be transformed into the most valuable material in the world. And this
sounds like I need to do some
unexpected bequest of providence to human beings, just when everybody is worried about climate change or some other mythological emanation of a spurious, godless science.
Yeah, I think I need to do some research on graphene. I didn't exactly get classes on graphene in seminary, and so I'll go on YouTube.
It's new. It only has become. Tor and his team discovered how to manufacture it by the ton only 3 or 4 years ago. And it's
amazing.
Just now emerging. But there are thousands of companies rising up all around the world to pursue this new transformative element that actually comes from the very carbon that endows our flesh.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. Anyway,
I want to go back to Men and Marriage, particularly on the part where you wrote about androgyny and in reflection to schooling. And so, you're talking about how male, female in schools together, it has certain outcomes. It produces certain types of men. If you were to imagine if George had his way, and we're like, George is now the in charge of education in America, how would we ensure that we raise up boys to be men within a system of schooling? What would that look like to offer something that's an alternative to our current system in schooling?
Well, I do speculate about single-sex schools, and there is this illusion that boys and girls develop the same ways, and that is an illusion. Boys are slower in some ways, and they are more vulnerable in some ways, and less adapted to modes of instruction that are increasingly dominant, and this is so it is a drawback to try to push both the sexes together and treat them as if they aren't different, and the result is just vast amounts of money on special needs and all these ways, and prisons and all these ways we compensate for our failure to recognize that men and women are different from the childbirth through their lives, and to treat them as if the differences are trivial or artificial or the result of some perverse patriarchal regime is just sexual suicide, as I explain.
Yeah. Another topic you mentioned in the book is population control. And this is something I'm fascinated by because, especially over the last few years, we've had, and it's been going on for decades, but we have people that speculate and desire, not just speculate on it, but see population control as a noble thing. Even I live in Boulder, Colorado, and you'll see yard signs that advocate for depopulating the earth. And so I'm curious to know, is this because it feels conspiratorial if it just stays in the realm of ideas. Do you believe that our current system is kind of like working towards population control, like it's kind of baked into the way the economics and marriage and all that kind of stuff works today? Would you make that kind of argument?
Yeah, it's nihilist. However, my other new book, apart from Men and Marriage, is called Life After Capitalism. There's one up there somewhere, and it tells you the argument on population control, and it's shows that contrary to all the assumptions of these movements, which are really nihilist, they to see a shrinking human presence in the universe and a complete eclipse of any divine providence but a new book that I wrote the introduction to is called Superabundance, and 2 chapters of it are in Life After Capitalism, my current book. And superabundance shows that the larger the population grows, the more resources we have, and the cheaper they are. And thus, the more abundant they are for everyone in terms of the number of hours a typical worker has to devote to earn the money to purchase the goods and services that sustain his existence. And it's called time prices, and they're universal, and they show that our progress is a lot faster than anybody has estimated, and that commodities are more abundant than ever. So people are not just mouths, people are minds, creative in the image of their creator. And so the more people, the better for the earth and the better for the people. It's just completely contrary to the economics of scarcity. The reason I call it Life After Capitalism is because capitalist economic theory has been confused by the idea that greed is good and that economics is a dismal science of scarcity. And I show that economics really, the only scarce resource is time. And money really is time, tokenized time. And the atoms in the universe are abundant, are really infinite, practically. And the Neanderthal in his cave, as Thomas Sowell put it, had all the resources we have today. The difference between our age and the Stone Age is entirely the growth of knowledge, and wealth really is knowledge, and these are all the themes of Life After Capitalism, but they're also begin in Men and Marriage. I show how the family and its commitment of faith in the future, acting in time, in the darkness of time, creates and unleashes all creativity that sustains our lives and ever expanding populations.
Yeah, and that makes sense a lot. With people my age, I think there's a lot of us are kind of cynical on capitalism, not because we don't see the good of hard work, we don't see the good of, production, that kind of thing. It's more, it feels like a rigged system that we were kind of raised under. There's kind of a joke amongst my friends. It's like, it's a shame we couldn't have bought a house when we were two, because home prices seem out of control. Products are more expensive to us, it seems, than ever before. Wages don't seem to keep up with the cost of living. And you think about people my age, we went through 2001 with a bit of a recession, then 2008 with a big one. And so there seems to be quite a bit of cynicism in the water about that stuff. How might you reframe that into a more hopeful vision?
Well, I think what your generation is protesting really is this leftist movement that's taken over our government through what's called the administrative state, a vast expansion of rules and regulations, all designed really to shrink our impact on the planet. It's the whole climate change cult is really a vision of an ever shrinking and more impoverished human presence, and I think it's not capitalism. It's this a secular atheistic elite that because it believes in the materialist superstition and the myth of overpopulation, ends up actually committing a different kind of economic suicide to complement our sexual suicide. And so that's, but the fact is that as Tupy and Pooley, these one from Cato Institute, one from the Discovery Institute, Gail Pooley, and have show with just in remorse. It just won the Simon Award for the best book of the year, Superabundance, and it just demonstrates that the more people there are, the more resources and the cheaper all the goods and services that sustain our lives can be. But if you want guarantees, if you're brought up to believe that everything should be guaranteed, then the world seems impossible, because
Sure.
you all you can guarantee is what already exists in a zero-sum economy where any gain for one person is a loss for somebody else. And in that kind of ideology, of course, everybody feels frustrated and futile and bitter and cynical. And that's the harvest of this combination of sexual suicide with economic futility and population doom that our elites in the Great Reset imagine they're preparing for us, and Christians have to fight it. This is our fate in the world of the 21st century, is to fight this doom-laden vision of secular and really almost demonic elites. Demonic's the wrong word. They're stupid and they're secular and they're futilitarian, but it's not really a conspiracy. It's just a big form of suicidal stupidity, as far as, it's really, but stupidity can become pretty brutal if you're the victim of it.
Yeah, and I would even argue, I mean, I'm a pastor, so maybe I can make this argument that the demonic is informing it. Anytime we see
Yeah.
anti-creational patterns, anytime we see anti-reproductive advocacy, these are anti-God ideologies, and the demonic is definitely in play, whether we want to label people demonic or not,
Yeah,
which,
right, right,
it's
right.
not
Yeah, I don't
not
want to
always a
say
good
they're
thing to do.
particular demons, but they're
Right.
certainly in the thrall of a demonic movement. I
Yeah,
completely agree with
absolutely.
that.
With with the talk about feminism today, it's a really interesting topic. The church has done really, I don't think it's done itself any favors on trying to resist feminism. But if Christians want to fight against kind of the feminist impulse that you've been fighting for a long time, what are the important battles that need to be fought today to fight feminism?
Well, first of all, to point out that anything that degrades and devalues motherhood and childbirth and the raising of children is a dire threat to real feminism, is a dire threat to the very sexual nature of women. And certainly these transsexual programs are a direct kind of assault on the providential nature of motherhood and family, and so it's a fake feminism. It's really the domination of the most godless and limited form of male sexuality, which is short-term, transitory, and without issue, not blessed with any futurity or links to the future of the civilization. So it's what they call feminism is in fact anti-feminism, and although it expresses itself as somehow an alternative to male domination, it actually completely accommodates the polygynous dreams of powerful men. That is one of the great themes and a really original contributions of Men in Marriage is to show that the real issue is polygyny. It's whether you allow the powerful men to have the young years of many women, and that necessarily relegates a large portion of the young men to lives of futile and predatory pursuits, and that's happened in China with the one-child policy, and where as many as 20% of all the Chinese young men have no hope of ever marrying or really having a link to the future through children. So this is and that's why this is a case for monogamy. There's a reason for monogamy. When feminists accommodate the powerful men of the society to they're essentially relegating many of the young men beyond the bounds of civilized life, and they come back and they're the barbarians. They attack the society, as I say in that fable at the beginning of Men in Marriage. The
Right.
princess and the barbarian is depicted in these terms.
One last question before I let you go is, you've done so much work and research on this for your entire life. very helpful contribution to what Christians can kind of take up and go with. If you had more time, if you were to look into the future and you were to kind of, kind of like your father looked at you and said, listen to your mother, she knows more about God. If you were to pass the baton to the next generation, what would you say they need to focus on in like the next 60 years in our country?
Well, I think they really should get their own lives in order, and pledge and ignore the cultural temptations that pretend that some sort of orgiastic carnality is the real ultimate bliss and ecstasy, and that's it's somehow a life, a comfortable, orgiastic life of reveling in existing wealth is going to prosper or yield any happiness. It's that there's nothing so grim and ultimately deadly as this materialist superstition and its orgiastic illusion of the nature of life.
Yeah, it's great. I think it's a really important topic for Christians to consider today.
Yeah, it's crucial.
Pursuing virtue and living self-controlled lives, and still pursuing prosperity and economic production, but not doing so under the guise of consumption or orgiastic pleasure. I think that's a good word. Yeah. Well, George, thank you so much for giving some of your time to me on my meager podcast after you've spent a whole lifetime talking with a variety of people, having bestseller books, having Reagan quote you. This is pretty monumental stuff. So I really appreciate you coming on the show today, George.
I'm delighted. Thank you, Chase. I hope to meet you one of these days again.
That would be great, George. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you're a listener and you enjoyed this episode with George Gilder, I hope you sign up in the Patreon in the show notes. You can sign up for any dollar amount. $5 gets you a sticker, $10 or $15, get you a mug. I'd love your support there. It helps me bring great guests to you. You can always find new episodes on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and you should subscribe there. Give it a great rating. Share this episode with a friend. I really appreciate George coming on here today and discussing these big topics, and really hope you enjoyed the episode, and I'll see you next time.